Hello and welcome back to the Football Fan Fanatics Podcast. I'm James Palin and joining me once again is my mum Nadine Dereza. Thanks again for everyone who's been listening to us from around the world in their thousands. It's really appreciated. The 2026 FIFA World Cup tournament is now over, and it does pay me to say that. It feels like yesterday that Mexico were playing South Africa in that opening game when they won 2-0. But now we have our winners, best players, best team and more. In this episode, Nadine and I will review the World Cup final between Spain and Argentina, and we will assess why both England and France too didn't pass the test in the semi-final to progress. Nadine, we're going to start by looking at the World Cup final, the most recent game. Spain, World Cup champions again, with 2 stars on their shirt, but not many are going to remember this final for the football. In the end, it was Ferran Torres who settled things deep into extra time, pouncing on a Nico Williams header, who came off the bench, by the way, to beat Argentina's goalie Emiliano Martinez after 106 minutes. And it was a deserved win, given how much better Spain had been throughout. Let's not forget as well, Spain conceded just 1 goal this entire tournament, which is some feat. But better in this situation is fairly relative, because this was a pretty grim watch. Argentina, for all the efforts of Messi throughout the tournament, really missed their attacking spark. They leaned almost entirely on spoiling tactics and rugged defending, and it caught up with them, quite frankly, when Enzo Fernandez picked up a second yellow for a really, really poor challenge and was rightly so sent off before extra time had even started. Nadine, we watched this match together on a big screen straight after the Gulf Open Championship in Southport, and describing the final as disappointing is almost an understatement, isn't it?
It is. And we had a fantastic time, didn't we, in Southport at the Open Championship, a first time for you and me. And then it was all brought down to reality. And the frustrating part is that everything happened around the match had way more energy than the match itself. And that comparison is from a very low bar. The halftime show, which dragged the halftime break from 15 minutes to a whopping 27 minutes, as woeful as it was, with I think Shakira, Madonna and Justin Bieber, was marginally more entertaining than the football. And I say that with a real sense of irony. And meanwhile on the pitch, I mean, it was stop-start, foul heavy, short on any particular rhythm, although the Argentine goalkeeper Martinez was tested early on. But Spain spent large parts of the game with loads of possession, but also a lot of time fuming at the referee, and rightly so, over what they saw as leniency towards some really rough Argentine challenges. But ultimately, Spain got their second Men's World Cup, and with the women's team already holding the equivalent title, Spain now stand alone as the only nation to hold both crowns at once. But I personally think that Argentina have finally had their comeuppance, and I hope they really have the decency to take a long, hard look at themselves, because they'll have done themselves no favours in the footballing world, Messi aside. They should be really ashamed.
Well, I believe FIFA should also have a hard look at themselves too, because the game kicked off 7 minutes late, and it's inexcusable. You have 4 years to prepare for a World Cup, and especially a World Cup final. This is the flagship event where everyone's going to have their eyes on, and to not have a game kick off in time, given that planning and preparation, is really disappointing, to be honest. And we said a lot about FIFA and Gianni Infantino as well, and Gianni Infantino, should I say, and it's really disappointing. But just to go back to Argentina, their goalkeeper, Dibu Martinez, credit to him. He was pretty big reason, to be honest, why the game even surpassed 90 minutes. He drew a stunning save to deny Lamine Yamal's free kick in the dying seconds of normal time. And then another big stop off Nico Williams as well, who had a goal chalked off for a foul in the build-up, which in itself was controversial. But in the end, Argentina just couldn't pull one more trick up their sleeve. They couldn't get one more comeback like they had done so against Egypt and England, and even getting past Cape Verde in extra time in the round of 32. My question for you, Nadine, is this it for Messi? Is this his last game? You know what I mean? He was in tears after, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think it will be. And it's a real tough way, isn't it, for him to bow out, losing the crown as holders and unable to really influence the biggest match of the tournament. He's 39 now, and there's no hiding that he plays a lot of this at walking pace these days. But don't let that fool you into thinking that he's been a passenger throughout the last few weeks. I mean, the man scored 8 goals this World Cup and was still Argentina's heartbeat, especially in that semi-final against England where he set up both goals in their 2-1 win. But in the final, Spain really just shut him down. One shot all game, nothing on target, and they made sure he never got near a dangerous area. Argentina didn't do him any favours either. Instead of leaning into the quality that they're actually capable of, that he's so capable of, they seem more focused on frustrating Spain and grinding the game into the ground. It was so poor. Yes, there were a few flashes of brilliance along the way as they fought to defend their title, but ultimately I think Spain deserved to win, and Argentina deep down should know that. As a result, Argentina themselves prevented Messi picking up the World Cup Golden Boot award. They're to blame.
Yeah, and speaking of which, Kylian Mbappe has become the first player to win the World Cup Golden Boot in back-to-back World Cups after earning the award for top scorer at this 2026 tournament. I know yourself and I, Nadine, both predicted Mbappe to score the most goals, so we were right on that one. I'm sure many of you watching and listening would have also had Mbappe as your main man to score the most goals. He's now also the men's World Cup all-time scorer of 22 goals. I mean, that's so impressive, just one ahead of Messi as well. And as I mentioned, he netted 10 goals in 8 games to edge out Lionel Messi. Although Mbappe did say he would have preferred not to be the top scorer and to have played in the final. But he said it was good for his legacy once he's retired. But right now, that wasn't what was on his mind. Of note as well, Jude Bellingham for England, Haaland for Norway. Haaland for Norway scored 7 times, as did Jude Bellingham, while France forward Ousmane Dembele and Harry Kane, the English captain, followed them in the list with 6. But when looking at the rest of the world, the awards, champion Spain swept them up. Rodri obviously won the Golden Ball as the tournament's best player, and Pau Cubarsí too, with the best young player who has impressed us all the way through. I remember we did a team of the group stage, didn't we, Nadine? And we both had Pau Cubarsí because how good he was at just the age of 18. Nadine, let's also talk about the goalkeeper. Do you believe Unai Simon deserved to pick up the Golden Glove?
Yeah, the Athletic Bilbao goalie was the best goalkeeper at the tournament. He just conceded once in 8 games, a very impressive record there. Thank goodness Martinez didn't receive the Golden Glove this time. I still can't get Martinez's crude gesture out of my head during the trophy celebration. Oh, I wish I'd brought it up now. The World Cup in Qatar 4 years ago. So, oh God, it makes me turn. So yes, credit to the man between the posts for Spain. Well-deserved accolade, and fortunately Martinez didn't pick it up this time for all the reasons I've mentioned, which I wish I hadn't now.
Yeah, Unai Simon was unbeatable. And what I find so compelling is that so many football fans, before the World Cup had even kicked off, or when the first game kicked off, were questioning why David Raya wasn't starting. He'd been unbelievable for Arsenal, obviously, in both the Premier League and the Champions League, claiming the Golden Glove for the Premier League. But De La Fuente and Unai Simon have this really unique relationship, obviously winning the Euros together in 2024. And Unai Simon was just fantastic for Spain, didn't make a single mistake, as you said, only conceded 1 goal against Belgium through Charles de Ketelaere in the quarterfinals. So, yeah, outstanding considering there was a bit of pressure on his position to play. But yeah, many will remember this year's World Cup final over the chaotic scenes that broke out right after the whistle. It kicked off in the immediate aftermath of the game when several Argentina players and staff got into altercations with Spanish players as they started celebrating. And after the final whistle, Rodri ran in from the bench, and as he passed Molina, the Argentina defender appeared to punch him. That was a spark. Rodri then squared up to Molina. Garcia ran over to back him up. Paredes jumped in, jabbing Garcia in the throat, it looked like. Gavi then came in, tried to break it up, and got shoved to the ground by Armada. Then Paredes got back in, pushed him down. Ayala reportedly grabbed Garcia around the throat and appeared to strike Dani Olmo. I mean, just saying all those names, it's shameful, isn't it, Nadine?
Yeah, very shameful. And as I said earlier, Argentina will have done themselves no favours in the footballing world. And it's right that FIFA, as you mentioned earlier, is now officially investigating Argentina with a disciplinary and ethics prosecutor apparently appointed to look into what happened. And there's real potential for suspensions for anyone involved, plus a possible fine for Argentine FA. I would have been a bit sceptical if they hadn't appointed this prosecutor, because we've seen that FIFA seems to be a law above themselves. But actually, in balance, Argentina's boss, Lionel Scaloni, who'd actually tried to calm things down to his credit in the moment, downplayed it afterwards, saying they're gracious in victory and need to be gracious in defeat too. It's just a shame his players didn't think that at the time. And that he also went on to say that losing in the final doesn't mean forgetting everything they did to get there. But very disappointing, very shameful.
Yeah, I've got a lot of time for Lionel Scaloni. Obviously, what he did in 2022, winning that, it was such a memorable World Cup final against France. And he always seems very calm. Even when they score, he rarely reacts. So I think the players have let him down, and it'd be interesting to see what disciplinary action Argentina could be facing here. It seems like there does need to be something that needs to be done. Well, FIFA's disciplinary committee has a real range of options on the table. So by appointing a disciplinary and ethics prosecutor, for example, they're signalling they want to dig into the full picture of what happened, not just look at it as straightforward violent conduct. And that generally means there's a higher chance of a more serious punishment if players or the federation itself end up charged and found guilty. And I know, Nadine, you mentioned just before the podcast something to do with Article 13. Can you just touch upon that, please?
Yeah, Article 13 is the key piece of the disciplinary code that they're going to be putting a spotlight on, which that basically covers offensive behaviour and fair play. So basically violating basic standards of decent conduct or bringing the game into disrepute. And obviously I don't want to judge anything in advance, but you know, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to see that they did bring the game into disrepute. But anyway, don't want to judge things in advance, but the prosecutor will weigh both aggravating and mitigating factors. And crucially, this clause carries the power to hand out a global ban. So I'll be looking forward to see what happens as a result of the findings here.
Yeah, we've seen this Article 13 used before. It's the same rule FIFA used against Luis Rubiales after he kissed Jenny Hermoso following Spain's Women's World Cup win, which ended in a 3-year ban from all football activity, which he tried and ultimately failed to appeal. Then there was Luis Suarez, banned 4 months in 2014 World Cup when he bit Giorgio Chiellini. He's had a few of those back in his time, though he ended up moving to Barcelona before the Premier League season had started, so he didn't miss out on anything in that regard. That said, bans on that scale seem unlikely here. I'd say it's hard to see all those players facing anything close to that length, wouldn't you say?
Possibly, yeah. I don't think it will be as harsh, but who knows? I mean, because it was there for the world to see. So let's wait for this independent, we think independent prosecutor to lay out their findings. But there's plenty of footage. There's loads of cameras to pick up, you know, all the action or lack of it. And yeah, I'll await that with bated breath. But it's worth noting this isn't FIFA's only issue with Argentina from this tournament. They've already opened a separate case after players displayed a Falklands banner following the semi-final win over England. So they've got a lot to look at when it comes to Argentina.
Yeah, speaking of that England game, we're now going to switch our thoughts onto the semi-final, which we don't really want to do, if we're honest. But we need to, because on this pod, the last time we previewed the England v Argentina semi-final, and I remember being fairly confident. But we mentioned the game was renewing one of football's greatest rivalries, obviously, after 86, for example, with Maradona's hand of God and then his stunning goal. And also the third place match has taken place since, and it was a glamorous game, 6-4 in the end, but no one really wants to take place in that. But how did England let a golden chance like that? They're 1-0 up with 60 minutes, they've just scored. How did they let a chance like that slip away, Nadine?
Oh, God, well, this is England, isn't it? Heartbreak seems to be the destiny, but this one I think is the cruelest yet. Remember, I've had years and years of England not winning anything. I wasn't born in 1966. And Thomas Tuchel's side matched Argentina blow for blow in the first half. It was more of a physical scrap than a football match. But firstly, I quite enjoyed the first half. And when Anthony Gordon put England ahead early in the second half, a first World Cup final since 1966 suddenly felt within touching distance, but it wasn't to be. And I must say, James, I was furious when Tuchel substituted Gordon off. I thought we'd parked the defensive bus far too soon. Being 1-0 up was not enough to get through to the final. We should have had more of a mindset like Spain, thought about winning it 2-0, 3-0, but no, it wasn't to be. And I was hugely disappointed. I thought this is a golden opportunity wasted. So, James, what do you think went wrong in the closing stages with England? I think I know some of the answers, but I'd like to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, well, let's start with Gordon coming off. I agree with you, Nadine. I can't believe he was substituted off. Even if we do decide to sit back, you need pace just to stretch their defence and hold up the play. And the one that really I just couldn't understand was Kane staying on the pitch for the full game. Harry Kane, we know how good he is, how incredible he's been for England throughout his career, arguably England's greatest of all time. But he was offering absolutely nothing. And as soon as we sat back, Kane was never going to press. He wasn't really helping much defensively. So I can't understand why Ollie Watkins didn't come on. I think the game was screaming for him. It cast my mind back to Netherlands in 2024 when we overcame them with a late Watkins goal in the semi-final. So that really confused me. Rice being injured as well. I don't know why he didn't come off sooner. And I don't want to say Rice was injured in the game, but he has been playing through this tournament with an injury, illnesses, etc. And I just think him and Anderson just weren't offering as much. Why not bring on Kobbie Mainoo, who can keep the ball a bit more, can play in tighter areas, which would have been helpful as well, would have bided us more time, rather than just taking all your pace off and bringing the likes of Dan Burn on, who's obviously been brilliant, but you've got to have something going the other end as well, something to press. We didn't have any of that, so yeah, it was easy to see. And it's easy for us to say now because Tuchel did well before that, but it does feel like in these big games against teams where it's 50-50, we always seem to come out on the wrong side. So,
well, you say that, but I actually sent a WhatsApp message to my football fan group saying when he took off Gordon, why is he taking off Gordon? So, yes, we can all be armchair critics and it's all great in hindsight. But I was saying stuff when it was actually happening, as were you, as were a lot of my friends. And my friend James, who followed England and paid a lot of money to be out there for the semi-final, he was furious with Tuchel. He really can't stand him as head coach. And he agreed with you when I sent a message saying my son thinks that Ollie Watkins should have come on. He went spot on. So he was with you on that. But I tell you what, there's no love lost between James and Thomas Tuchel. Not you,
well,
James,
do you
but the
think
other
he's
James.
under pressure now to retain his role as head coach?
Well, his decision-making seemed, really flawed, didn't it? So understandably, there's plenty of frustration all around. I mean, Tuchel was brought in specifically to get England over the line in the biggest moments. And this was about as big as it gets. And instead, England retreated too deep after scoring, as you've pointed out. And the substitutions didn't help matters, didn't make sense. Same old England, that's how I felt. I thought, well, what's the point of having Tuchel? This is the stuff that Southgate and other previous managers have been doing. I mean, personally, I'd love it if Pep Guardiola, formerly of Man City, took over as head coach. But he may be well heading to Italy to steer their national side back to glory, because obviously they've missed out on loads of World Cups recently. So I think England are stuck with Tuchel for the time being, but I expected so much better of him. And I'm not alone there.
No, and facing the media ahead of the third place playoff against France, he didn't seem to dodge the criticism and said if someone needs to be blamed, he'll take the responsibility, though he stopped short of saying he had regrets, calling it instead the scar we carry now. He pushed back on any questions about the team's spirit, but admitted England got too passive late on. Well, as we mentioned, it seems like he got too passive in his decision making. He pointed to the physical toll of the Mexico and Norway matches for the altitude and heat, respectively, in those games, and defended Kane's deep positioning as simply what happens when a team defends in a block. But that's enough about England now. Let's try and put smiles back on our faces, because I've tried to forget about it and now I'm remembering it again, which I don't really want to do. So let's go to the other semi-final, Spain against France, which again we watched together and we loved that game. It was an absolute midfield masterclass from the Spanish. They dismantled France, who were the favourites. They were the overwhelming favourites with their array of attacking talent that us included just couldn't stop raving on about, with Mbappe, Dembele, and Elise leading what we thought was just an attack that no one could defend and no one could beat. But Spain reminded the world exactly why they're the reigning European champions. And now FIFA have updated their rankings, seeing Spain at the top in number one. But do you not think, Nadine, up until this game, Spain had gone under the radar a little bit?
Yeah, I think they had. Yeah, they couldn't even beat Cape Verde in their opener. And Lamine Yamal, yes, he came in with mention about him being injured and he was still sort of trying to overcome that nagging injury. But their teenage superstar had scored just once. Oh, mind you, I think he was brilliant in the final, having said that. But going back to the semis, I think they clearly timed their peak perfectly with 6 clean sheets in 7 games. I mean, they outplayed France in every single department. And there's a really nice story underneath all of this with manager Luis de la Fuente, who we've talked about before, and his culture and what he was trying to instill in the club. And when he took over back in December, 2022, plenty of people were saying, Luis de la who? Well, he'd only really coached Spain's youth sides before then, so that's why people were being quite rude in their assessment of him. So a pretty low-key appointment at the time for a country that's used to big personalities at the helm when you go back into the history books. But since then, not bad reputation, eh? He's delivered a Nation Leagues title, a European Championship glory at Euro 2024, and now a World Cup final to boot. Not bad, eh, James?
Not bad at all. And I think much of that goes down to one man, which is Rodri. And after that semi-final, he really reminded everybody just why he's a Ballon d'Or winner, a Euros winner, a multi-time Premier League winner, a Champions League winner. I could keep going on. Interestingly, Pep Guardiola appeared on a podcast before the World Cup started and said that this is the best Rodri you'll see. If you haven't seen the best Rodri this season, you're now going to see the best Rodri at the World Cup. And who could doubt Pep? Pep was right. Rodri and Ruiz, particularly in that midfield, I mean, they both kept out Pedri, and he's been arguably Barcelona's best player in the last 5 years. So in terms of that midfield battle, they schooled France. They really, really schooled France. Tchouameni, Rabiot, Kone were just, they were getting run circles. They couldn't get near Rodri and Ruiz, who were just so delicate on the ball, so composed. Rodri really, really reminds me of Sergio Busquets in that famous 2010 Spanish side that also won the World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, well, Pep, come to England, if he's predicted that Rodri was going to be the man of the moment, and he was, would you say he was the man of the match during the semi-final? But I mean, we just couldn't believe how France seemed to capitulate. We were expecting so much. We'd predicted them to be the outright winners. So, we have to hold our heads in shame.
Yeah,
We got that wrong.
I think there's a few candidates for man of the match. Yeah, Cucurella as well at left back, or Cucurella if you're Spanish,
Cucurella.
was amazing. He's the complete left back. I think he's definitely the best left back in the world. Maybe Nuno Mendes, the Portuguese left back, but he always turns up in these big games. He was really good against England, for example, in the Euros 2024. You can see why Real Madrid have picked him up. He was incredible. Oyarzabal as well for Real Sociedad. Another one questioned, Spain questioned for not really having a proper number 9. And he sometimes plays on the left at club level football, but really he exemplifies what it means to be a team player for Spain. And they've never really had a proper number 9, certainly in the last 10 years, but
Since you've
really,
been
really
born.
exactly that. But yeah, and for France, they're going to be really disappointed, of course. They seemed very despondent in the third place game, of course. Mbappe most certainly as well. He's such a hungry player, and you could see that throughout the tournament. And the fact he just couldn't really make any impact at all on the game, he's going to be disappointed. But let's park that there for now. And I want to turn our attention to FIFA, which I don't really want to do. But one thing we've learned from a decade of Gianni Infantino running FIFA is that his answer is always more tournaments, more games, and the main thing, more money. And yes, more of that Super Bowl style spectacle that stretched this year's World Cup final half-time show out to 27 minutes, or half-time, should I say. So maybe it's no surprise he's now floated the idea of a 64, yeah, you heard that right, 64 team World Cup. And it was only 4 years ago we had half the number of teams. So arguing that smaller countries need the incentive to keep improving. Except, of course, smaller countries already got their shot if they're good enough. Just look at Cape Verde, Curacao, Jordan, and Uzbekistan this time round. Format-wise, it would actually tidy things up, letting the top 2 from 16 groups advance instead of juggling third-place qualifiers. But beyond that, is there really a strong footballing case for going bigger?
Oh, gosh, this is a tough one, isn't it? Well, it's already gone up, as you've pointed out, from 32 to 48 teams during this World Cup in comparison to Qatar 4 years ago. So pushing ahead with further expansion plans, in my humble opinion, to increase it to 64 teams is too much too soon. You know, already I'm still not used to the idea of 48 teams, but I need time for that to sort of sink in, and whether we're going to stick to that format. It sounds like we are. But to suddenly want to increase it already, it's like, hold on a minute, this has already gone up. But having said that, you know, the case for expansion really rests on two things: a cleaner format and more chances for emerging nations. And Infanto's been leaning hard into that second point after Cape Verde's incredible run, drawing with Spain and Uruguay and pushing Argentina, let's not forget, all the way to extra time in the last 16. Pretty impressive. But that fairy tale has to be weighed against the flip side. 6 teams, if I'm right in thinking, Haiti, Iraq and Jordan didn't pick up a single point. And the group stage this year had relatively little jeopardy for the bigger nations. If you add in more teams, and it gets even harder to imagine shocks like Germany, Italy or France missing the knockout rounds. Well, mind you, Italy didn't even qualify, but you know what I mean. You know, those big names, it's unlikely they're going to be knocked out once they're there. But I'll be interested to get your thoughts, James, on who would actually benefit from the extra spots if the World Cup did actually increase to 64 teams. Who in the world is going to benefit?
First person I can think of is Gianni and his bank account. No, well, that's unfortunately is the case. But based on this year's qualifying, most of the additional teams would come from Europe, Africa, South America, which highlights a bit of an imbalance since Asia and CONCACAF were clearly the weaker confederations this tournament when you look at the teams in terms of making it out of their group. So a bit of a tension here. Expand fairly and you might need to weight places toward Europe for competitive balance, but do that and you undercut the whole growing the global game argument. Almost a third of FIFA's 211 member nations would be involved in a 64 team format. And it does raise the real question of whether the group stage would start to feel less like a World Cup and more like one giant sprawling qualifying tournament for a knockout event. So there's got to be there's got to be a balance. You got to keep that competitive nature. I've loved seeing certain nations like Cape Verde, Curacao, even when they scored against Germany, despite losing 7-1, moments like that. But I think to increase it again, which would be a 100% increase from the 2022 format, does just seem a little bit too soon. Do you agree with me, Nadine?
Yeah, definitely. We just need time to bed down. And I don't know whether his power is diminished now with so many other federations, UEFA, and you know the list goes on. Then they're not going to be happy with that. So I'm not sure if he's going to come under increasing pressure. But you know, FIFA is, as I said, it's like a mini nation in itself. When England thought they might get the World Cup, several tournaments ago, and they were given the nod and then sort of got backstabbed. So, I don't know, you can't trust us to know really what is going to happen when it comes to FIFA. FIFA will do what FIFA wants to do, but I'm just wondering if they can be held to account more. Do you get the sense that it's going to be more difficult to pass this through? How are you reading it, James?
Well, interestingly, there's the presidential elections for FIFA in 2027. And as far as everything I've seen, Gianni Infantino looks like a clear favourite to win again. He's really popular amongst other candidates. So, which is a shame, to be honest, because we can outrightly say he's not got the interests of football at heart. He's got the interests of himself and FIFA at heart. So, yeah, that's going to be interesting in 2027. And if he wins that, then he gets through to the next World Cup, and it'll be more of the same. But finally, Nadine, on a touchier note, I know you were very sad to hear the news that the former England captain and manager Kevin Keegan had passed away this week, and you had the opportunity actually to interview him a few years back. So, what are your memories of him?
Yeah, I was very sad. I'll try not to cry now as I'm thinking about him, because he was a superstar in his day, but completely down to earth. I mean, I loved him when I was growing up. I had posters of him, even though I was a QPR fan. I had a soft spot for Liverpool. Sorry, I know you're an Everton fan, but it was because of Kevin Keegan. He was hugely talented. He was honest. He was hardworking. He defied the odds. You wouldn't think, wow, he's going to be a global superstar. But he just put the time and effort and work in, and the highs and lows of his career sort of really mirrored his success on and off the pitch. And in his prime, he was the Mbappe or Messi of his generation, a two-time Ballon d'Or winner. I mean, that's incredible in itself, back to back, and one of the most gifted players England has ever produced. And there's a phrase, I don't know if you've heard it, they say never meet your heroes. And I'm so glad I ignored that advice when I got the chance to meet Kevin Keegan. I was interviewing him for a business channel about his career in general, and also about how leadership skills on the football field could be transferred and translated into everyday business settings. And I never forget, at the end of the interview, he said, I hope QPR will win the league next year. I mean, obviously he never played for QPR, and that's just how generous he was, because he knew that would make my heart sing. He didn't say which league QPR might win. Sadly, that didn't come to fruition, but he was just such a lovely man to meet in person. And yes, I think I was so happy and gushing, had a big Cheshire Cat smile, grin on my face afterwards. But actually, Keegan's career had so many chapters: a trophy-laden spell at Liverpool, further stardom in Germany with Hamburg when the Bundesliga wasn't in its ascendancy. But he put that league on the map, and he was really brave to go there at a time. A lot of people questioned his decision. Now, the likes of Harry Kane, we love watching the Bundesliga, but at the time, it wasn't so big, and he certainly did a lot to put Germany on the map. But he also captained his country. He had a late career spell at Southampton. He was also at Scunthorpe United, Fulham and Man City. So his influence and impact was wide-reaching. So there's so many people that loved him. They've got fond memories of him. And I just wish you got to see him as a player, James, because I think your generation probably have very little understanding of who he was and how amazing he was as a player. I mean, social media wasn't around at the time, so there are not loads of clips about him. And there are so many kids in Germany called Kevin now. So his legacy lives on. So I'd like to think that people won't forget him. I certainly won't. But actually, it was in Newcastle when he became something more than a footballer, first reviving the club as a player, then as a manager, turning them into one of the most thrilling and beloved teams English football has ever seen. And even in the 95-96 title challenge, which ultimately slipped away from them, that was such a memorable season. And many will remember, you may have seen clips of this, the raw emotion of, I will love it if we beat them. And that rant was in relation to the so-called mind games Man United's Alex Ferguson was playing at the time, their former manager. But that moment only captured what Geordies already knew. Keegan wore his heart on his sleeve, and they loved him for it, unconditionally, always. So rest in peace, Kevin Keegan. I loved you so much.
Yeah, well, let's end this episode on that absolutely lovely tribute to Kevin Keegan. Thank you for listening to this week's Football Fan Fanatics podcast. And thank you, Mum, for your excellent company once again today. To make sure all our episodes drop right into your feed, you can follow our show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen online. And to find out more about us, please visit our website, footballfanfanatics.com. And you can also watch us on our Football Fan Fanatics YouTube channel too. If you're connected with football and would like to appear on the podcast, please get in contact with us. All the details are on the website. Thanks again and see you next time.